for all of you who choose to become radio professionals, you want to tap, not blow. You can apply that to many aspects of life. But welcome, welcome, welcome. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kids of all ages. As we so often say in television, Kevin, roll that video. Well, we say it.
1 billion people worldwide use social media. That's 1/7 of the world's population. Social media is being underutilized by the space community.
The use of social media for direct scientific and technological advancement is at a very nascent stage. Scientists, experts, universities, industry, space agencies, and decision makers have started to realize the potential of social media.
Getting people involved in the missions on a detailed level brings down the barrier, and people do not treat space projects like science fiction. That means that you get lots of opinions, including new ideas about the science and about how you work.
These things are often called citizen science, participatory exploration, public collaboration, crowdsourcing, or even Tom Sawyer science, referring to the classic novel where the title character shows such enthusiasm for normally mundane tasks that others are encouraged to pitch in.
Online crowdsourced science projects have already shown that people are willing to cooperate to help research. Think of the power that so many extra observers can give to our weather and climate missions.
We don't only want to share our ideas and our work with others through the internet, but also to get feedback from them so we can improve our daily work.
Welcome, everyone. It shows you the best laid plans. Hi, my name is Bill Nye. I am the Executive Director, the CEO of the Planetary Society, the world's largest non-governmental planetary science interest organization. Are there any members of the Planetary Society? Yes, I love you guys. Welcome. And for those of you just arriving, you missed the video running, I think, would you say at 5/6 speed? I think we just found incompatibility between the old PAL system, the more modern PAL system, and the old, in the United States, it was NTSC, National Television Standards Advisory Council. So you will find that the people here on stage talk at regular speed, even though their video perhaps did not. So as is my place, before I introduce these, really, you're going to very much enjoy this. It's going to be great. These are perhaps the world's foremost authorities on the use of social media for the betterment of space exploration. I want to say that this is brought to you with a collaboration of the Workforce Development Young Professional Program Committee, the WDYPPC, the Space Education and Outreach Committee, the CEOC, the Global Earth Observation System of Systems Subcommittee, GEOSSS, and Space Observation Committee, the SOC of the International Astronautical Federation, the IAF, here at the International Astronautical Congress, the IAC. So the panelists up here are here because they won a very competitive competition. They had to submit 2 rounds of video. Some were 15 seconds, some were 3 minutes, about how to use social media for the advancement of space exploration. So seated to my right is Patrick Hamblock, works for DLR in Cologne. DLR. It's German space interest. Cologne, in Cologne, on operations and payloads on board the International Space Station, which you may also know as ISS. He uses social media to try to communicate with the international partners on his projects in a quick and effective way. What he has to say, I think I find very interesting. Ruth McAvinia Is a science editor now at ER Quartz in the Netherlands. Before that, she worked as a journalist in radio, television, and social media, including finding stories on the social web and distributing them through major news organizations, international. She's a student of the master's program in science and society at the Open University, if there are any Open Universities here. That would be the OU. Arfak Khan, seated to my far right, final year student in mechanical engineering, yes, at, that's my background, at Manit in India, the Maulana Azad National Institute of Technology. You're executive co-secretary of the Space Generation Advisory Council, the SGAC, and social media, use social media to monitor and solve basic problems, and we're talking about human problems, water pollution, deforestation, and so on. Emma Fry, two doors to my left, graduate student in the Master's in Public Policy program at the University of Alabama, but you already have another master's degree, yes, in business. Don't worry, it's no overachievers. This is space. 2011 IAC paper on the importance of IAC, International Astronautical Congress, on the importance of social media to mitigate the risks and impacts of a major space weather event. And she recently published in Space Policy. Rafael Horty-Sequeira, recently graduated aeronautical and astronautical engineer. Yes. Founded and coordinates the Upper Atmosphere Space Launcher, UASL, and uses social networks to manage the UASL team to get work more effectively and get feedback and ideas from the general public. Finally, Jessica Crow, a master's in business administration with a focus on communications at the San Jose State University in California. And those of you unfamiliar with the United States, San Jose is part of the Silicon Valley. She was part of a NASA collab which first evangelized the use of social media in ways to allow the public to participate in NASA's missions and develop a communication strategy. And I will say, Jessica, I remember back, I believe, in 2007, when you introduced me to this crazy new kooky thing the kids are doing, Twitter, right? And one of your big ideas, as I understand it, is what you call Tom Sawyer science. What is that?
Tom Sawyer science actually came from a paper from the mid-90s where a biologist was characterizing fruit flies, and she took these pictures into the classroom and had a bunch of students look at them, and the students were able to do the same kind of classification that she would have done as a scientist and spent many, many, many hours on it. And the idea behind taking this idea from a while back and applying it to the internet age is that you don't have to go 20 students at a time. You can now use the entire global web and participants. And like Tom Sawyer in the story, he had this major task of whitewashing this fence that he had to do. And by going into his community and asking people to be a part of it and to help out, he accomplished the task faster, in a more fun way, and probably in a better quality than he would have if he had to do the whole thing himself.
He got people, what was the town Tom Sawyer was in?
I don't remember.
Yeah, he got the people there to think it was exciting to work hard to paint the fence for him so that he wouldn't have to do it. Brilliant! And it is interesting for me that my mother, when she was in college, counted fruit flies. Like, these are old ideas. So how does this teacher, the 1994 paper, got people to count fruit flies all over the place so she didn't have to do it all herself, and she could get it done faster, and the people who did it thought it was fun? Is that how it went?
Yes, the kids, they were doing real science. This was something that someone was doing in a career. They could be exposed to what it was. And today there are many examples of how this is being done on the internet for projects like the Stardust mission, and there's a project called Galaxy Zoo that was one of the forerunners in this, where there were 1 million pictures of galaxies from the Sloan Sky Survey, and they needed to be classified. And they estimated that it would take one graduate student working 24/7, 3 to 5 years to do it. And by involving a community of tens of thousands of people, they did the same kind of basic classification with the redundancy of 30 people looking at each image to ensure quality, and accomplished it in less than 1 year.
Less than 1 year, probably at higher quality. Now, along that line, Ruth, in your reporting, you mention a fireball, where people use this same sort of thing to make the data higher quality.
That's right. Well, compared to what Jessica's talking about, where you have the projects on Zooniverse, which are excellent and a lot of fun, this was a case more of an opportunistic use of social media, because it's just about 2 weeks ago now, on the 21st of September, there was a large fireball which was seen in Britain and Ireland, and it was an ideal time for people to be looking up because it was Friday night. So they were out and they were moving around, and it was also a long event, so lots of people had the opportunity to take some evidence of the fireball. So lots of pictures went up on Twitter very quickly, lots of video went up on YouTube, and that gave scientists an opportunity to figure out, using location data and looking at the nature of the event, what kind of thing it might have been.
So they could get probably a higher quality result, right? That having many people report the location, or the devices they use would report the location.
The devices were reporting the location. A lot of people just mentioned it straight away. I found out about it because my sister texted me and she's seen it. So the first reaction that I had, as I pretty much have with any news story now, is to look up Twitter and see what everybody else was saying. And lo and behold, the pictures started to appear.
So in other words, it wasn't just one person making it up. It wasn't a hoax. You could verify that.
Exactly, and you can use the evidence that they've posted. Anytime an event like this happens, somebody will post a fake picture or a picture of a different event, and that's part of being on social media. There is always somebody who's just goofing, but there are a lot more people who are just saying, hey, I saw this, does anybody know what it was?
And so this added a dimension to the problem. The first one was intentional. Hey, count my fruit flies. I say, hey, please, count fruit flies. And this is an event that happened and people just responded on their own. So, to me, this is what I would say I would expect the use of. In both cases, we're talking about Twitter, right?
Well, in this one you would advertise, but a lot of the social aspect comes from building a community that supports you and helps you, that you interact with.
So, Patrick, you use it in a slightly different way, I think in an importantly different way. What do you do with social media?
Yes, so I'm working on on experiments on board the International Space Station, and there we basically use traditional tools and email for communication, but we also tried something out to communicate between the international teams, and we use a locked Twitter account, so it's not really public, but it's still a Twitter account, to communicate between the teams that are in Germany and in the US, and all over the place, to just get everybody to the same level, so on the same page, so that when you're actually operating during the day, during the night, and you're maybe not on console, so that you know what's going on. So
on console, that's what we call it. When I see the shot of mission control,
yes, that's
on
how
console. On console, the spacecraft is on orbit, and you're on console.
That's correct.
What is it when you're on Twitter? You're on Twitter.
Yes,
so,
on Twitter.
So you're able to. This is fascinating. You're able to coordinate the team collectively. Like, we got an experiment coming up. Be sure to be ready tomorrow morning at such and such o'clock.
Yeah, basically you tell everybody what stage your experiment is in. So that the people who are maybe preparing for their shift at home, or on the way to work on their smartphone, know what's going on.
So are there problems with security? That is to say, email is not perfectly secure, but it's not being broadcast the way Twitter is.
No, so of course this is just non-sensitive information and nothing anybody could do anything with. So it's just that if you have to know what you're talking about if you read it. So if it would become public, nobody could do anything with it. So it's not there's no risk to, even if Twitter would accidentally make it public, that you could lose the data or make it public.
Okay, I'm with you. But suppose you had, if I may, some Yahoo, some reckless person on your team who accidentally put stuff up. And to address this, Emma, you work on policy, yeah? So do you believe there are policies needed for this sort of thing?
I do, and I think that it's just such a new field right now that we are all using it. We've been on Facebook for a few years now, but there's just not formalized policies on how to handle those types of situations. And that's universal across agencies, academia, organizations. I think they're all going to have that same problem, where you need to have kind of these norms and these rules set out for your agency so that either there's one point of contact or there's one person that's handling the account, but to have a little bit of a control of information. And it's important in academia because you don't want your research out there before you publish.
So what are we going to do?
That's a good question.
So before you go, Raphael, you have a team that you coordinate, right? And let me ask you, do they voluntarily, the word would be police themselves, control the information?
Yes, indeed. Actually, I believe that social networks have always been there, right? It's just now we have a new tool, which is called the internet and the web, that we can do more intensive use of those social networks. So in my case, I find it really useful to use it to manage a team, so they can communicate between them in an easier way, but also post reports, find a schedule for a meeting, and all these things that are difficult to manage when one is at one side of the world. So this is a potential use of the social network.
So have you had any trouble with bad data?
No, actually, this is a good point, because in our case at the Upper Atmosphere Space Launcher, we are open source. So we try to share the information and the results that we obtain with the public. We are not afraid about doing something wrong or going wrong about anything. We just want to learn about how to reach 100 kilometers high with a small payload. That's what we intend. So I guess when you get into the commercial aspect of that issue is when the troubles go around.
So, Afaq, you, to me, also are somewhere in between on this. Tell us about how you use it. Use Twitter, I guess. And what do you use?
We have an integrated approach to social media. So it's not just social media, but we are using online tools and integrating it with social media. The interesting part is that we are getting voluntary contributions from people.
So here, what do you do? What exactly do you do?
So our project is called the Tree Count Project, and we count trees. That's very simple. So we have an interface from the Google Earth application interface, and we have programmed it in our website, and we engage volunteers to count trees in college campus. So we have 30 plus volunteers who are counting trees in our college campus, and we are preparing green index maps for our campus. And we want to apply the same methodology for urban areas and highlight the problem of decreasing vegetation in urban areas.
And then you would make recommendations to elected officials, you'd vote.
If they choose to listen.
Yeah. So, but here again, you don't have a concern about the quality of the information because you have enough volunteers as redundancy.
Yes, we use redundancy as a tool to decrease the error in our data.
Did you do an analysis of that? Did you prove that?
Yes, so we have done that. We did a sample survey for our campus, and we did a ground truthing process in which we count the trees in a particular region of campus, and then we assigned the same region to the volunteers who did the counting on the interface, online interface.
So you're starting with something like Google Maps, right?
It is Google Maps.
How do you know that what you're starting with is high enough quality to begin? Like it's not too old?
We have the Google Maps publish this date of the image, so we use that particular thing. And then, in fact, we need the historical data to see how the vegetation has gone down. For example, in our own campus, we have infrastructure development going on. So a lot of trees were cut down. And we have concluded that more than 1,000 trees were cut down and they were not replaced.
Well, let's get on this. Let's start tweeting about this. How are we going to replace them?
We have to replace them because we have prepared a density map of our campus, and we'll show that these particular regions in our campus do not have enough trees. So we can plant it in those regions.
So do you talk to the dean of tree planting or something like that?
Once we get the results on paper, we will do that.
And when you say on paper, you probably mean online.
Yeah, online.
So it's just that expression is still with. Yeah. So you guys, we can keep talking, and I can assure you that I spent a couple days with these people. I'm okay. They are fascinating, but do people out there have questions? That's what I would really like to get you to engage with our expert panelists on the use of social media in your business. So there was a hand back there. Do we have a microphone person adrift? Okay, so if it's not a question, keep it crisp. So today's 1 billion users. So that would mean that about 1 in 7 humans are on Facebook. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. So I wonder where this is going to go, where it would stop. Jessica, you're kind of leaning in. Go ahead.
I am. I'm excited by seeing numbers like that because, our interaction with the public and our asking people to do things before, it's limited to I'm here and I'm in this room with you guys. And with the internet, that power of having those people, those are resources that you can use to gather data for you, to gather data even without you asking it, and to contribute skills. There's, for instance, NASA developed something called NASA Whirlwind that was an open source project, and they worked with the community and built this with just volunteers in this kind of social network of interacting with people contributing specialized skills to accomplishing a goal. And that's what this kind of connectivity across the globe is giving us, that is a very exciting place to be in time right now.
So do you see policy issues with this? I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, if someone could, for lack of a better expression, hack Facebook successfully, they could, and I'm not kidding you, start a revolution, right? Enough false information were published by some amazing server somewhere.
Sure, and I think one of the greatest benefits of social media is also one of the greatest risks, and it's exactly what Ruth was talking about, which is that real-time data, that ability to get things right away, right when it happens. But the problem is, how do you regulate that? How do you control the information or make sure that it's actually quality and it's not false?
Well, you're the policy person and you're the journalist.
I honestly think Ruth had some good ideas on it. This is not new, it's just a new format. And so I'll pass it to you, but I think that that's what we need to look at, is this is not the first time we've tried to communicate with other people.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, I think one of the issues is that people assume that the computers can do everything by themselves. And so coming from a journalism background where suddenly information that people used to have to go to collect and be paid for was coming free through people on Facebook and Twitter, and we've discussed as well video through Quick and Bamboozer, and there's so many of these networks now. But people in business of delivering information were realizing that this was now being handed out for free. And when you're in the business of paying for data, that's a bad thing. Some of them tried to make it that they could put in an algorithm that would sort out the news from the noise and that they wouldn't have to do anything else. But the people who've been successful at it are the people who actually apply a human being to the scenario and say, we need somebody actually to analyse this. And for those who were here yesterday at the plenary when we were talking about the UNOSAT and the opportunity in emergency management, Francesco Pisano, who was here from there, he said specifically that they still have to employ humans to work with the data. You can't just have everything fill in real time, but you can get a good idea of what's happening by watching stuff run by in real time.
So, just my own personal, for those of you who aren't from the U.S., I've worked on television in the United States for a long time, and I guess about a month ago, I found out again that I was dead. This happens, it happens every year in my interpretation when college starts. Bill Nye is dead, and this year, my death was not really specified. Normally, I'm killed by a weather balloon. And as far as I can tell, I'm not dead. I mean, it might be, but as far as I can tell, I'm not dead. And even the person I'm talking about here is my sister, my own sister, who's, if I may, my best friend, texted me, "Are you okay?" Okay, well, what if I were, if I weren't? No, I've expired. I mean, it would just be. It shows you that we have this tremendous volume of information, but it's of lower quality. right? But as I always say, if you go to look up the atomic number of beryllium, that's probably going to be right. It's probably going to be the correct number. Like lying about the atomic number of beryllium, there's not a big future in that, really. You were going to say something?
Someone in the audience may be changing the Wikipedia page as we speak.
Just to fool you, man.
But the exciting thing is there's a community there that is watching for that. Wikipedia, we've seen all these studies that say it is as accurate or more than Encyclopedia Britannica because, both things are written by humans, and what you may lack in super specialists and proofreaders that are from one organization, you gain by having a global group of people looking at this information.
Here, Afak, you were going to say something.
So examples like Wikipedia are very important because they show that we can do real knowledge sharing and real science information sharing online and using social media. So it is open, you make a change, but if it is wrong, there are people who correct it, and it's being corrected every minute as we speak. You make a mistake in the Wikipedia page, and probably the next day you will come up and you will see that you have been banned or your mistake has been corrected. So this kind of contributions is what we need to apply to the Earth observation, to the technology operations and space industry.
So do you think we need to do more of that? Apply that? Is it not being done enough? Are we not being diligent enough in space? Is space unique this way?
Yes, because...
Hold the mic a little closer to you. Yeah.
Because the social media is a new thing, and everybody is scared to step up to the new things. And I'm talking about the space agencies here. They need to be more sensitive to the fact that social media is the next big thing of information sharing. So if there is somebody from the space agency of my country or from some other country, you need to take social media more seriously because you can do real science with it, and there are people who are coming up with the examples of it.
Maybe you can also just take the ideas of social media and then transport it into the space agency world. So make your own tools. So don't rely on Facebook or Twitter. And for example, at DLR we are not allowed anymore to use Doodle. I mean, I don't know if you used it before. So just
I've used Doodle quite a bit, trying to get. It's like herding cats to get the board of the Planetary Society together.
Yeah. So we have our own tool for that, so that so that the information is contained within this organization and not within Doodle, let's say. So you could just, for example, if you want to share scientific data across Europe or across the world, you could just have your own social media style tool for that, and just use it the way maybe Facebook or Twitter is used, but still it's maybe then safer than to use any of those networks.
You're going to take it.
Yes, actually I wanted to extend what Afak was saying before about the uses of social network in the scientific world. Just imagine one thing, that now from one of the images of the Curiosity, someone working in a mine, for example, or doing stuff on a mine, just realize that there is a trace of some biological element there. It would be possible from a social media tool to extract that information and to give feedback to the agencies or to whoever is working on that mission to do a major discovery. And these can be extended to operational issues, to any kind of scientific research.
But Jessica, you work for a very large space organization which does not have a booth at this Congress, at one time. Doesn't that very large space agency have social media and so on?
Yes, we're very, very active in using it for outreach. Every center, every major mission will have an account for outreach. And if you want to go to the website and see the list of all the accounts, it's www.nasa.gov/connect. And if you scroll down that page, under the parts that talk about, the Twitter, the Facebook, all the other accounts that we have, there's a section that says collaborate. And that collaborate section actually brings together some of these opportunities that actually are asking for public participation in different projects. So I encourage you, if you're looking for ways that this is already going. There's also a really great website called spacehack.org that pulls together some of these places where you can be part of a community and part of something that's contributing real science to space exploration.
Which is fun. So I do have a question from the audience. In your examples of the fireball or extreme weather event, how do you know the pictures and the videos are from the right location at the right time? Could somebody fake that?
Someone could always fake that, but there are a few things you can do, because you can look, you can compare videos with each other. You can look at the data that come automatically with the video in question, and you can apply your own knowledge and common sense of a situation. I mean, it was a highly unusual event at the fireball because it was so long. And normally you wouldn't expect people to have time to take out their camera and think, this is really interesting, I should take a picture of this and post it. But that did happen. And like we say, with extreme weather like hurricanes and tornadoes, people have time to do it as well.
How long was the fireball?
It was over 2 minutes.
Wow.
And so you have that opportunity to compare what people are saying, but the best accounts from my perspective would be the first people to say something, because once you start comparing people, then people get, oh, this other person said it was 10 pieces by the time it broke up. And the other thing is, in my dream world, the scientists would come and interact earlier and talk to the media about what it was. So instead of major organisations quoting Vox Populi saying it was just like Independence Day, or I thought the sky was falling in, you might have had a little bit more contact earlier on from the scientists. Online and Twitter, they certainly were interacting and speculating and talking about it, but it did take a while before it started to come through officially.
So I mention this because I think that's what space agencies fear, is too much false information.
But I think, to add on to what Ruth said, we had a similar experience last year in the southeastern United States, where in southern Tennessee and northern Alabama, all of a sudden there were all these pictures on Twitter and Facebook one evening of what people thought was a forest fire on the horizon. They saw these red lights, and so there was a lot of asking news agencies on their Facebook pages and putting the pictures up. And so even though people may be wrong, because what it ends up it was the Aurora Borealis. It was the northern lights. We had a major space weather event. And that's very rare. Those are never seen that far south in the United States. People didn't know what it was. They're usually blue and green and not red. And so even though they may have been wrong in the information they were applying to the photographs, solar physicists are still able to use that information to study it.
And just to give you perspective, Tennessee is around 30 degrees latitude, not 60, or where you'd expect aurora. So it's probably, I wonder if it's climate change. It's nothing to worry about. Here's a human question in the front row, but I meant to mention that it's Space Affairs is the you can email to Space Affairs. Let me see, and it'll show up, or you can email, I guess, to that one up there. And we have diligent people in the back of the room who will send it up here. But here's a question from a human in the front row. Let him hear you outside. Blow the roof off the dome.
Hi. I tweet for ESA, so I'd like to take the opportunity to ask you all, in a case like the fireball, is what you'd like us to say. Because, of course, I saw the reports immediately about the fireball. I immediately contacted our experts to say, do we have something to say? What do you think is the better approach? That I say, I don't know, but we're looking? Or that I wait and give you an authorised answer from an expert who's able to speak?
Well, I have a strong opinion, but I'd like to hear yours.
I think my initial reaction to that would be, it's important to say something, because if you leave a vacuum, then everybody else fills it. The problem that scientists have consistently with the media and with the world of rumour and half-truth that is social media is that scientists like to give information with degrees of certainty, and everybody else in the world is absolutely sure of what they think it was. But I think if something has happened and nobody is saying anything about it, it appears as if they're not aware. So they need at least to say, this is what we know about it. And to be fair, I mean, it was turned around fairly quickly. It was late on a Friday night, and by Saturday morning, a lot of people had spoken up about it. But I think there was still a gap in between where people were just talking without any advice. And this is an opportunity for scientists. It shouldn't be a burden on them. It should be an opportunity for them to say, here's something concrete, or here's something we think it might be, or here's something it definitely wasn't. And get involved in the conversation. Because even if a lot of social media is rubbish, I mean, there are whole servers that just have to deal with Justin Bieber messages. You still have a lot of good stuff on there. If you're a fan, that's an excellent exchange of information for you. But within that, like you say, there's more information. It's not of worse quality, it's just jumbled up with stuff that's of worse quality.
Okay, but my advice to you would be get on it right away and say, we don't know, we're looking into it. Anybody else have a thought on that?
I would take the opportunity to jump in really quick and start asking people for input. And we had a much less widely seen, but still a fireball over the Silicon Valley, and actually widely across California and Nevada. It was during the daytime. It was a little bit harder to track than this one, but we immediately, connected with our scientists and started, asking people for reports and have you seen anything, and can you get it out there that we want information on this. So I would, even if you don't have anything directly to give, I would try to engage it two-way as fast as possible so that you're making that connection, they know that you're interested, which also, makes your community feel good about you. So.
Are there any other questions from the... Oh, here. Afaq, please, read on.
One scenario that you might think would be helpful in this case. What happens if there is a major threat, a major global threat, and the social media is speaking about it, but the space agencies chooses to say that we'll analyze it and tell you? Wouldn't it create a mass hysteria on the social networks? If the space agencies, if the governments choose to be mute and say that scientists are looking into it. It can be anything.
Space debris. Yeah. I mean, what do you mean by, what's the problem with space debris? It leaves meteor streaks? When satellites fall down, people get alarmed. Well, but they'd get alarmed anyway.
So in that case, you can give very positive information.
Well, I would recommend get out there. Yeah, we saw the streak in the sky, and we're looking into it. I'm not saying it's another government agency spacecraft that happened to fall down, and we can't tell you what it was doing, but it was something in the sky. Yes, we're looking into it. So does anybody out here have a question? I was just reminded to point to this if you want to send them in electronically. Anybody else have a hand going up? We stumped them. But regardless, there's one, yes, behind the camera. Do we have a microphone, or can you just blast us with like you're at the forum in Pompeii, but Pompeii before, not after 79 Common Era, yeah.
One question, I know that the NASA Twitter feeds are bound by guidelines in terms of the owners of those Twitter feeds need to be trained in things like international traffic and arms regulations, export control, so that you don't inadvertently share information that may be compromising of security. So I wanted to ask the panelists that are not NASA, what are your guidelines before you turn over a Twitter feed to somebody that doesn't know and may post things like telemetry information or things that may compromise security?
Patrick, do you have any problem with that?
So of course, there are always guidelines. So I guess for the official feeds of the different agencies, also in Europe, not only NASA, you have guidelines, and they have to be in line with the agency policies and all these kinds of stuff. So of course, if you're using something like this on your project, you have to make sure that you don't post anything that's vital. That's clear.
So. Can you give specific examples of things that you do that you think are inherently safe?
What we do is basically that we have something like you could call it a code that you couldn't interpret, even if it would be let's say available to the public. So even if that is available. It wouldn't be essential, and nobody could do anything without it.
But do you have a problem with somebody who doesn't know any better posting stuff?
Yeah, of course you should make sure that everybody who actually uses that is aware and knows the risks and has had some training on this. So ideally, of course, if you post something, you would have a check. So that basically somebody on a project posts some information that is viewed by somebody else to have a 4-eye check on this, so that it doesn't contain anything that you don't want to get out there.
I think that one of the things to consider here is that putting information out in front of people who aren't in your organization is not a new thing, right? I imagine most organizations, most people that are presenting papers here had to do some kind of check. Someone looked over what you were presenting to make sure there was nothing proprietary or that was otherwise protected or sensitive for your company or for your research or your organization. So I think that that's one of the things to think about, is that we have people that are going from inside the organization to out in front of public groups or technical peers all the time. So this ability to exchange information is not new. This is the same thing. It's the same common sense, the same kinds of things that you would do there. You don't, for instance, at the same time, you don't give your brand new intern that's been here 1 week access to do your social media just because you're like, oh, it's the young person, go do it. It's no, you want to make sure that the people that you're communicating are aware of those sensitivities and aware of what the guidelines are for any communication that you might do.
Go ahead.
Just to follow on from that, you're looking at a specific instance of information that's essentially private. So that's one case where every business would have certain things that couldn't be put in the public domain. And as the news journalists at Reuters were told, don't scoop the wire, don't put something out public until the company is ready to make it public. But it also goes to the heart of how science operates in terms of releasing its information, because Jessica was mentioning earlier work that's in progress or things that aren't ready to be published. But there is still a general locked-downness in the sense of scientists need to publish things in peer-reviewed journals, often on paper, and that's still where the mentality is, whereas some parts of science are moving towards collaborating online, publishing earlier, talking to each other, and it really challenges them in terms of the way they're used to working, their traditions and their funding. And so it's all tied up with this interaction, and even as long as 4 years ago, Scientific American tried to put together a Science 2.0 proposal, and their suggestion was that the article should be open and everybody could pitch in. And these are exactly the issues that came up.
So let me ask all of you this to this very point. What's this going to be like 5 years from now?
It is certainly going to change, because there is a wave towards this, and people are working on open source projects that are at the scale of the world. There are people who are working on collaborating millions of people into science through the examples that we have already mentioned. So it is important that we understand that it is going somewhere. So like we did not have a space policy before we started going into space. We're not going to have a social media policy for space operations unless we start doing it. So that's how policy will come. Once you start using the tool, then you will make the policy for it, of its usage. You're not going to sit before we start using it.
It's like evolution. It's bottom up, not top down.
Yes, actually, my idea on this is that while it's going so fast, just look how long we have been using that. It's a really short period of time in terms of the web use of the social networks. So who cares where it's going? I mean, feel free to do whatever you think it's useful with it. And if you ask me my opinion to where I would like it to lead, well, why not turning social networks and social media into trust networks? We were talking before about how we should care about giving information through it. Why don't we care more about developing things with people we trust? Why don't we care about the trust through the social networks?
I would encourage everybody in the audience, or maybe watching online later on, to just think about how could you use social media maybe in your job or anything that's like that, and just try to use it. Be disruptive, as we heard a couple times this week. Just try to use it in your daily life, basically.
But nevertheless, and you're the woman for this, we want you experts to predict 5 years hence. Emma.
I think we'll have more formalized policy. I'm not sure what it will look like. I do know that the current American administration is looking into ITAR, and that particular issue is something that they want to be able to figure out. How can we still protect what we need to protect in the United States while fostering open communication with the scientific community? So it is on the radar of the current administration, but it's an interesting question to ask because it's a completely different policy issue when you're looking at real-time data sharing on social media. But I also think one thing I want to add is I encourage everyone to also figure out ways you can use social media in your work or your school, but that it's a tool, and I think it's a tool that's an add-on. We have virtual forums here at the IAC, but it's never going to replace the value of the face-to-face communication we're having at a meeting like this. But it's very interesting that instead of slips of paper, if you can get the Wi-Fi to work, you could just be, tweeting in your questions. So it's an interesting tool.
Yeah, I would draw a parallel with what has happened with news media and journalism, as is my background, because there you still have newspapers that get printed on paper and sometimes delivered, and you have television broadcasts, but in a breaking news situation, the information is being exchanged most readily through Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. So I think there's kind of parallel tracks in news media now, and I think something similar could develop in terms of the exchange of information in science. So you will still have conferences and you will still have published peer-reviewed journals on paper, but you will have an alternative as well, and you'll have people interacting. And I would strongly encourage anybody here who hasn't got involved in social media yet to consider logging on and looking at some of what's being said and filter out the rubbish, because there's a lot of very useful information and it's not that difficult to apply yourself to find the really good sources and become part of the conversation that's there.
Jessica.
In 5 years from now, I look forward to the point where it doesn't have to be a next generation special plenary that's looking at social media and how we use it for this. This is not as much of a generational thing as people are trying to make this barrier. When I organized a tweet up, I had a woman there in her 70s that had been an engineer in the past, and she was there and she was tweeting along with everyone else on this Stardust at Home participation website that they have for the Stardust mission. They feature, as part of their community thing, they feature a duster of the month every month, one of their participants, and this person a couple of days ago is an 84-year-old woman in West Virginia. So it's not just a young person thing, it's not just something these kids are doing today, as Bill says, even though he has 460,000 followers on Twitter. It's not just a young person thing, and as we encourage more people to use it and show the value in it, then it's going to be a very exciting time when it's not something special we have to think about in a different way, but it's something that we incorporate like any other tool that we might use.
Is there a question from the audience? Because I got one here that's relevant, and I'm not sure who would write this. But what can we actually do to promote this to management? Which is, I paraphrase, why isn't our genius recognized? And so, do you think that that you have to be active to promote it to management, or is it just going to happen?
I think it's just going to happen. Actually, when we started using it in the upper atmosphere space launcher, we used it as a small team. So it was so much easier for us to do all the work and all the things we had to do, and it was so much easier to communicate between us that we just realized that was the way for us to go. So I guess that it just takes the companies and the institutions to start using it to realize that this is the way to go.
Be organic.
I think you have to add some education of management there too, because people fear what they do not know or understand. And so if you want to be doing this in your work or at your university, then go show it to your upper management. Show them how you're using it, explain it to them, walk them through it. And I think that's one thing that you can do to help them understand better. Because a lot of times I think the younger generation, we're on Facebook for our social lives. Well, you need to be able to explain to your boss or to your management why it's useful and then show them how to do it.
Probably one of the issues is the awareness in terms of, it's not, people think that social media is just crazy. It's not organized, it's not well planned, it's not something that you control. So people in the management want control. You can do that by showing them that it can be organized, it can be produced in a form that can be what is already being done. So say we have a project wiki in which we put up the entire system engineering of our project, and it is very well organized. You can just, anybody in the team can just look up and understand that what is currently going on and what is needed to be done. And it's not printed papers, it's on the social media. It's restricted to the project team, but you can use it. And in fact, because we are a university project, I'm talking about my satellite project that I'm running in my university. Because we are a university project, people come in and go out. So for the new people, it is very easy to just look up on the project wiki and understand that what is their role, and it is very easily defined. And then they can contribute and make changes, and the changes reflect very quickly.
I think for people looking at the global picture over a long period of years as well, it is one of these things that looks like it could be a fad, and there have been so many different networks that have started and stopped, and some have got lots of people involved and some haven't, and so there is, I think, a difficulty there in waiting to see how well it works. But I know certainly for news organisations, the tipping point was January 2009, because the first picture of the Hudson River plane crash came from Twitter, and that was the moment where everyone went, here's where we need to start looking for our news. So, and I think the other thing we need to consider is that already a lot of scientists say they would love to do more outreach, but they simply don't have the time because they need also to do their research. And so plenty of people who are going to do school visits or other public events are doing so from the goodness of their hearts, when outreach should be a fundamental thing that becomes part of their duty, and the kind of training that you would need for social media would be part of it too.
We have a question in the audience.
I just now emailed a question to the Gmail address on the screen, and I just got back an autoresponder saying I'm out of the office until October 15th.
We'll tell you then.
So, can you tweet that so that I can read it?
My question was, how do I tweet it to you?
Yeah. I can't explain this, but note this technique, the vibrating the molecules in the air between is still effective. But listen you guys, I'm all for the open source thing, but I myself was a head writer and featured performer on a television show for a long time. And, okay, I'm an artist, okay? I'm an artist. And so my intellectual property is very important to me. So do you guys have any concerns about intellectual property when it's going to be shared with everybody at the speed of light?
Well, I think that in the world where we are living now, it's more productive to cooperate, and it's also important to know who has done things so we can verify for sure. But to be able to work in teams with other people without caring that much about prestige or about who is actually doing things and just getting to develop them for real is much more important than patents or any other kind of regulation on that.
I would guess that in some ways it would become more open and some it would be more closed down, in that before there was Twitter, if you went to a major golf event as a journalist, you weren't allowed to do play-by-play, shot-by-shot commentary unless you were a television or radio rights holder. Now everybody who's sitting watching it on their television tweets the scores the whole time, and the Ryder Cup on Sunday night was particularly fun. So that has changed to open up the IP that was part of the golf tour's property. But I think, on the other hand, when people create something, they'll be more careful to lock it down. So it will sort of go in both ways.
I do not want to rubbish the intellectual property rights, but I just put one question in front of the audience over here. What if Isaac Newton said that the gravitational equation is my intellectual property, you're not allowed to use it?
Well, I'll tell you, there is a pretty good analogy to that. In the land of genetically modified organisms, modern corn and soybeans, canola, companies own the rights to DNA. And this is a gray area, at least for me. It's a real twilight kind of thing where this is a plant that grows, and if you let it keep going, it will mutate. Where do you get to claim that it's still your idea? But I'm talking about, let's say, a very popular children's television show, hypothetically, where you lose control of it and you don't get any income from it, just hypothetically. And so I see this as a problem that, is yet to be solved. I guess the main thing is to continue to make something that's high quality. But there's a question back here. Yes? 2 points. Now, can you, if this were a game show, can you put them in the form of a question?
Certainly. In the future, planning for new things like after Facebook.
After Facebook? What a world.
MySpace, after all. MySpace used to be where Facebook is today. But there are other options. Are there other programs you've looked at? I know, for example, there's one called Diaspora, which is an open source system that allows it has a streaming server that centralized it. This software is open source and allows web trust.
Well, if I understand this model, the evolution model, the good ones will eat the bad ones. Is that what you're driving at?
But that's also modified with network too, where it's inferior part.
Yeah. So did you have a second point?
The other is that perhaps, of course, when marketing goes, there are also considered other methods of capitalization. Radiohead was out years ago where they had a pay what you can switch.
Right. Well, so Radiohead controlled that album release. In other words, they locked it down more tightly than they would have, right?
Well, you can download it for free if you want it, but you paid what you wanted to. It turned out they paid just several $1 million on that nonetheless because lots of people wanted to pay 99 cents because they liked what the band wanted to do.
Yeah.
And there's also some really good.
Well, this gets into something. People I work with, say we ought to make a video that goes viral. That's a great idea. We should write a million-selling song. Yeah, we should do that. Let's get that. Can we do that by the weekend? Yeah. Patrick, you were leaning in. Did you have something you were going to say? Oh, good. Not really. Okay, sorry.
Just when you talk about making something that goes viral, you jest, but we did have an example this year with the Coney 2012 video that went viral. That was an orchestrated viral release.
They got many people. They organized nodes, or what? Is that the right word?
Works for me.
Yeah. Here's another question.
We're talking very much about social media, Facebook and Twitter, but there are also social networks like academia.eu or ResearchGate. If you're looking for intellectual property, in this way you can connect with actually researchers in your network. Actually, this might be a better tool, especially for us in the space sector, to communicate and network with each other. Instead of having an open message.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If you have a network with a lot of people on it, and you've got this graph of, what would you have? Evolution of stars. And you worked really hard on that. And somebody just happens to put it up on an open source network, it's gone. You've lost just hope your copyright is stuck to it somehow.
Yeah, but I would maybe see it more as a collaboration, where you would say, like, okay, what do you guys... I have a problem here. What do you guys think?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. If you help me with this, I think I found particles that go faster than light. Yeah. Well, if you remember that, right? It turned out maybe you didn't. So, hey, you guys, this has really been great. I've really enjoyed this. So here's one more question, and let me say, fabulous time.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, sir. There's a guy back there. Your tie is great, but you're going to have to be next. Guy with the bow tie, you know, look, he's got to take it.
Thank you. My question is, how can social media promote blue sky research? I think there's a general disconnect between science and the public, that the public doesn't understand the importance of basic research and blue sky research for the continued upward march of humanity. So I was just wondering if you could think of any ways that social media can raise the public's opinion of blue sky research.
Well, I hope you guys have. My opinion is it inherently makes people more aware of extraordinary research, of outlier stuff. I think is much more accessible now that there's social media than there was 20 years ago. Do you guys?
I would just say that I think that using social media for promotion in general we're pretty well down that path. And I think that if you can connect, if you have a sponsoring organization or something like that and you want to do the traditional outreach, if you're just talking about letting people know about what you're doing, if you want to take it that next level and ask for people to help and be a part of it and be social in that they're contributing, I think that is, if you have a place where it makes sense to use the resource of people and volunteers, then that's probably the best way to get people to care about what you're doing, is to make it important and meaningful for them personally.
So you guys, yes. So we're out of time technically, but let's take this last question. It better be good. This is it, sir.
Really good. This is the space conference. Space needs reliability, performance, and safety. What I have learned is that social media are easy. So they are kind of entertainment. What we need is reliability, and that's like documentation. So that's the difference when you're on the TV.
Boy, you're saying that social media are inherently not as reliable and safe, or the programs developed under social media are not reliable and as safe as they would be if they were on paper?
And the information distribution is not reliable.
Information. Any comment on that?
Just an idea. It's not what we are using to communicate, it's how we are using it. So it just takes you to go into the social networks to make it work how it should. Just use it.
And maybe a question to think about, how many times did you experience that Facebook was down, and how many times was your local mail server not available?
Yeah. And I would just bring up, for instance, with the Galaxy Zoo people, there was one of the researchers who started that project. He could analyze and characterize 50,000 galaxies in a week by himself. And just thinking about one human doing that kind of repetitive tests versus having each of those 50,000 looked at by 30 different people, with him looking at it as one person, he makes one mistake and no one else is going to be looking at those 50,000 galaxies. But having 30 different people look at it, if you get the same answer every time, that quantity is going to allow you to have the redundancy in looking at the data that you can't have by one, researcher or one grad student or intern doing those kinds of, obviously monotonous tasks.
What I understand is they're saying just try it. I mean, when I had jobs, I saw the place brought to its knees when the copy machine stopped working. So that doesn't happen nearly as much with social network. Hey, thank you all very much for coming. I want to remind you there's a Young Professionals virtual forum out in the hall here, and this evening I will be with Buzz Aldrin, the other guy who walked on the moon. I will be there with him. He's quite a character. He's very thoughtful about the future of space, and we will have a tweet up over in the, I guess it's called the technical forum, the worldwide forum, yeah. Global network. Yeah, so we'll have that this afternoon. And Buzz is Mr. Aldrin. Dr. Aldrin has given the future of space quite a bit of thought, and I think you all would really enjoy reading and what he has to say and meeting him. Thank you all very much for coming. I look forward to this forum continuing informally for the rest of the week. Thank you very much.